This channel changed. I thought this was a pretentious, semi-centrist, pop short philosophy kind of channel, so I just lumped them in with the rest of the neoliberals, as just another attempt to nullify the radical aspects of philosophy. But this just changed my entire video and my pretty extreme cynicism. Maybe philosophy can be revived. Maybe short consumable commodity philosophy and art can be ended. Maybe arts won't be traded as a communication commodity between individuals in the near future. Maybe I just haven't seen enough really good philosophy channels. Illusion hasn't become truth. Indeed, not fully, never fully. Everyone is a reproduction of social and political conditions. Everyone a reproduction of a reproduction, a hyperreal. Except there's also a lot of people like me who are a reproduction of a non-reality, of a lie, an ideology, a capitalist mindset with capitalist premises and so on, but who also have recognized a truth in this non-reality. The usefulness of believing in the capitalistic false worldview, symbolic order and such. But still, I will not advocate for art.
Even if it's technically bad, whatever comes out of that is coming from a pure place, and that is never a bad thing. To reiterate, art feeling is important.
It doesn't have the potential it used to before capitalism, and here are the 5 essays on why I devalue it. My main points are as follows. 1. Art will not bring about revolution. We need action on the ground. Art is a commodity, as is space and time and everything. Art will not bring fulfillment. It physically cannot under capitalism. Art is for the artist, aka for absolutely no one. It shouldn't fucking matter. Those might seem like simple points, but they're not. I will expand on them in my following essays. Essay 1, title, Death of an Artist. At first glance, it may seem like it's great I'm studying political theory so much, but as the victim who is actively experiencing that horrifying reality, it is not fun. It is not a positive experience to know that you basically have no future unless you get extremely lucky. I am someone who is seeing themselves decay in real time and masking it in academia. Every time I cite a source, I am attempting to mask the sheer pointlessness of the arts I'm doing. If I adhere to an authority figure like Baudrillard or Foucault, I then inadvertently reinforce the idea that my art is not purely for me, i.e., I take my art too seriously. There is no shortage of artists and philosophers, there will never be one. Thus, understanding these subjects are quite useless. In fact, it is an active disadvantage under capitalism. I am no artist. I am simply indulging in escapism. Getting away from the real reality in front of my eyes, real exploitation, through the feeling of confronting said exploitation. This so-called art, if that can ever exist under capitalism, is merely me pursuing endless desire. I feel a sense of beyond joyousness, not jouissance, when I write, draw, read, and so on, when I engage in arts. But under capitalism, the destruction of autonomy is inherent in the very way that capitalism actively structures itself through the processes of production and domination. A sense of deprivation is constant even when one is joyous. In fact, joy or art feels unnatural, as that is an autonomous choice, autonomy which cannot exist under capitalism, especially for the children making our iPhones over in the third world. Subversion feels like unreality, and that feels terrible rather than hopeful. The manufactured fear of deprivation is precisely this. I will, no doubt, be deprived of my art, whether through literal death or abstract artistic death. No matter what happens in the future, I am fucked in every single way. I either need to abandon my artistic drive, which is basically killing myself, or stick to it and starve on the streets, or stick to it and degrade it for the mainstream. I'm sure everyone under capitalism faces a dilemma somewhat similar, unsure of employment and a stable life. This is the norm, as the ruling class would have it. This is the capitalist state of nature, which is not merely imposed on man, but ingrained into them to such a degree that it isn't just the capitalist state of nature anymore, but the state of nature. The universal domination of not just all of life, but life itself. It is in this sense that I am terrified of the future. Becoming an inhuman Lovecraftian incomprehensibility is the new ritual for entering maturity in today's society. The ritual of maturity is the deprivation of everyone and everything, desire for everything, consumption of anything. The absurdity of the societal domination of man since the feudal age has today evolved to such a point that it is no longer recognizable, no longer able to be analyzed through outside ideas, e.g., desire itself is capitalistic and always has been. This is human nature, and that, I believe, is why so many accept this system. The best anyone can do these days is rely on the now pretty much ancient words of Marx. I am scared of where my, and specifically my, life is going. Nowhere is there escape. Even existence on your own terms is merely just a severe form of capitalist deprivation. There is no such thing as existing outside of capitalism. Contrary to mainstream rosy pictures of artists as either masters in tune with the world or tortured geniuses, art is in reality nothing. It is nothing unique. It's simply another tragic experience among the infinitely many under capitalism. Art is not an ivory tower. Art is not the ultimate truth in life. It is not sublime nor even positive in the slightest. Those who fall to the intoxicating aspects of art distract themselves from all of life. Those who glorify it, uphold it as human, are the most inhuman, the most disconnected, and the most elite. There is nothing that can revive art, for art has already decayed into absolute nothing. As long as capitalism exists, art doesn't.
The success is an after effect of people responding to
about a religious war.
not despite him being, it's because of it.
Finally tonight, we don't usually give story tips to NPR, but here's a story they might want to cover pretty soon and doubtless will. M&M's just announced that it's redesigning its cartoon characters to be more...
Simply put, what did Dialectic of Enlightenment, one of the most famous philosophy books, accomplish? Today, even the most vague socialist societies have been put to death, beheaded without remorse, resulting in a Russian and Eastern European economic collapse not seen before since World War II, and the elimination of non-self-interested support of independence movements in the third world. It is this tragic uselessness of art that I want to exemplify. Media is either far too integrated into the system, or the system is so powerful that towers over any elements of subversion that media may have. It is not that I believe art is completely useless, but that we place far more significance on it than deserved. Art is a tragic endeavor, and if freedom is a disease without a cure, as many philosophers say, then art is the same. Our human drive to make art is ultimately negated under capitalism, fruitless as all other vain attempts at subversion are. The truly valuable thing to do is proper Marxism, organizing and physically rebelling with actual violence when necessary. Skilled laborers, especially skilled laborers, educators and theorists to build a revolution from the ground up, brick by brick. Slowly from the local level, some of those revolutionaries may be artists, but I don't believe it is strictly necessary. Art is insignificant under capitalism. It should only be emphasized under a socialist society, otherwise people like me provide no real use. Entertainment is already encapsulated in alienated consumerism. To attempt to break into a realm so dominated by capital would be suicide, almost equivalent to working within the system, though not quite. I am actually quite frustrated with how glorified art is. We must be human and creative, the most average, mundane person says, seeking an escape from alienation. Popular philosophers like Nietzsche and Camus provide an illusion of hope, living rebelliously without rebellion, artistic endeavors under capitalist alienation. A ridiculous contradiction that cannot possibly come to a synthesis. Art is life, everything you do is art sounds far too optimistic, for the shaman of the village is no longer. The art, or rather magic, of the everyday, which used to be ingrained in the grounds and skies, is now blocked by concrete skyscrapers. There is no magic, there is no childish joyousness and imagination. I personally think I've tried my goddamn hardest to prove otherwise, but in the end, modernity has become far too totalitarian for some obscure essay like this that nobody will see to change. Art cannot do what people expect it to, bring vitality into a deathly alienated world.
I'm killing you. I'm killing you. I don't care about anything else. I don't give a shit about anything else. My programming is just get that fucking guy right now. There is no like, oh, he's running? I'll back off a little. Nope, it's just until I get you.
Essay 3. Not an essay because I got lazy with voice acting and I don't want to spoil my essay on dialectic enlightenment. I don't want to read a portion of my essay on dialectic of enlightenment because I have to reread it once I make the actual video, and it's also spoilers. But the main thesis is that since art is commodified, art no longer exists. Art is dead at the moment of conception. Death is ingrained into everyday life, and art is no different. Every waking moment is another death. Capitalist mechanisms ceaselessly reproduce itself at every turn. The Baudrillard hyperreal is a non-reality more real than reality. Art today controls humans, not the other way around. Media's non-reality thus becomes more real than reality, as it is the controlling force. Walter Benjamin thought the industrial reproduction of art would bring art everywhere, but instead it was commodified and instrumentalized to serve standardization, homogenization of workers in a factory. The more a worker is like a machine, the better. Lukács's reification also fits in somewhere in this web of concepts from all over the Marxist sociological spectrum. And that was a summary of 30 pages of information.
When Hegel talks about Earth, to put it in primitive terms, how out of natural organisms human mind emerges, he gives a beautiful, more Foucauldian than Michel Foucault answer: madness.
Essay 4. Art for the Artists. why some art seem meaningless. Written a very long time ago, this is the famous portrait of Ross in LA. It was a pile of candy that you could just take. That's it. Nothing more to it. Is it supposed to evoke thought? Who knows? Maybe it's just a free candy pile for the sake of the visitors. Just something nice to eat while viewing other art. Point is, there is no point. Not to the audience anyway. But of course, there is the title or subtitle more accurately. Portrait of Ross. Seems like nonsense, right? Well, it is. It absolutely is. It is entirely meaningless in of itself. And what's more, the artist has the gall to not even title this work, as if you're supposed to interpret it in your own way, as if there is some deeper philosophical meaning that you just aren't reaching, or maybe you're not supposed to reach it. Maybe you aren't supposed to be the viewer. Maybe the way society thinks about art is idiotic. Art is of course for the artist and must be to be art. And we have lost sight of that some time ago, I think. Art is like a sort of coded communication, and Portrait of Ross in LA is no different. Now, whether you understand that coded communication doesn't really matter now, does it? In fact, in cases like this, I don't think you're meant to understand. Not in the abstract sense of the word, anyway. You can't ever, and I mean ever, understand art. You can only merely appreciate it. It is just as hard to imagine death as it is to imagine another life. After all, there is no difference between the two. You are forever trapped within yourself, and that is the absurdity of life. It is the inability of us to cope with it. The inability of us to understand because we aren't supposed to understand. To eliminate the absurd, to eliminate life itself. To gain meaning or some arbitrary useful knowledge from Portrait of Ross in LA is to kill the art. Kill the magic that makes humanity possible. To understand is to not be human. To understand this art is to understand another life, as if you're some kind of third-party observer. But of course, we all know that's not possible. Here, just to demonstrate, let me tell you the meaning of the artwork. The candy pile weighs 175 pounds. Ross Laycock, the person, weighs that same amount. He suffered from AIDS, and much like the candy pile, he withered away. Slowly lost more and more of himself until he was nothing. Until the last candy was eaten. Look back at the candy pile again. What is it now? Do you understand, artist? No, you don't. All you can have is respect and appreciation, and maybe a bit of pity. Some art is just not supposed to be for the viewer. Some art is just not supposed to convey emotion or idea to those who desperately search for it in a vain attempt at understanding themselves. This is my channel introduction. Well, it originally was, now is not. Perhaps this type of art is the closest that we can ever get to pure art, quote unquote. Not that art that conveys emotion is any lesser than, oh my god, a fucking helicopter. Okay, helicopter is gone now. Not that art that conveys emotion is any lesser than this type of art, of course. Art for the artist is basically just living, and art for the audience is living with someone watching. YouTube then must always be art for the audience. Even I, who is actively trying to make art for the artist, cannot escape from this YouTube mindset. So that's why I'm not editing this video that much. Okay, that's irrelevant. I made this channel to make videos that I enjoy watching, because if I can't get the video essays I enjoy, I'll just make it my goddamn self. Essay 5, finally. The Paradox of the Will to Truth. This is about the pursuit of philosophy, no thumbnail. Written kind of a while ago.
Out of this impasse created by man himself, all of us, and particularly those who are responsible for the attitude of the US and the USSR, should realize that we may have vanquished an external enemy, but have been incapable of getting rid of the mentality created by war. It is impossible to achieve peace as long as every single action is taken with a possible future conflict in view.
I've always wanted to learn more, understand better, i.e., I wanted to do more philosophy. And yet, at the same time, I wanted to hold philosophy on a pedestal, as something unable to be understood, a connection with life that I will never reach. I wanted, in a way, a Greek-like pursuit of the ideal. I wanted Socrates' famous phrase, I know that I know nothing, to manifest itself into reality. I wanted the Camusian absurdity of existence to be absurd, completely so, i.e. nonsensical, illogical, unfollowable to the human mind. Future me expanding on this, I mean like spirituality, magic, shaman of the village. I want existence to forever be as if there is a bottomless pit, an infinity that I can walk towards forever, something outside of time and space, like a black hole, and yet this very will to truth must arrive at something, the bottom of the bottomless pit. What happens then when you become the teacher of a subject rather than a student? What happens when you see the wall that will inevitably stop you in what you thought to be a Sisyphean task? You won't ever reach the wall, that you know all too well, but you can see it. You can see the ideal on the horizon, something so grand, majestic, and all the more terrifying for it, all the more existential. The will to truth is thus an aimless spiral into death, or at least the idea of it. Death being the achievement of the ideal, the end of the Greek journey that was supposedly endless. Many philosophers told us that we shouldn't try to explain the world in an understandable and concise manner, but isn't that just what humans do? Even if your philosophy is all about being chaotic and embracing life, that is still a simplification of life. Future me here, standardized capitalist mechanisms also simplify life, abstracts human labor into quote-unquote human resources, nature into natural resources and such. I guess what I'm trying to say is the endless pursuit that makes me think I can eventually arrive at some truth, or rather I am arriving at the truth, constantly arriving and never having arrived. But when I inevitably discover that that never was possible, that the endless pursuit will inevitably result in a simplified view of the world, I guess I'm just disappointed. The Sisyphean ideal that was promised to me, that was served to me on the silver platter, is just that, another ideal. The will to truth, for me, is a great disappointment. Paradoxically, I both want and don't want the truth. The inevitable killing of that paradox that is when I arrive at simplified truth is one of the great tragedies of life. To put it more concretely, I desire for desire. Philosophy, even as it poses desire, is itself desire. The artist works in the same way, constantly chasing desire itself. Once you understand something, it then becomes banal, then you move on to the next thing, and then that thing becomes banal. Philosophy, for me, no matter how much I try to avoid it, is the mere exploration into concrete concepts. It's a treasure hunt for the most unique and interesting concepts. Philosophy is constantly evolving to adapt to the times. New concepts are always on the horizon. Philosophy thus becomes quantified, in a way, put into concrete terms as is science, merely the development of concepts. And because I export my meaning onto philosophy, if philosophy becomes concrete, then my meaning also becomes concrete, which is a highly inhuman experience. And this is paradoxical because this is also philosophy. future me here. Just to clarify, I don't mean to say that this is what philosophy is. This is just what it is for me. Philosophy has for a long time always contradicted itself. In this case, it's the embrace of the complex through the simple. Writing puts concepts into concrete, understandable terms, which is not what life is, and yet it is also an embrace of life simultaneously. I do not want to turn everything into simple banality, and yet this is the modern human condition. There's always a higher plane of analysis, yet all analyses are trapped within the human mind, except for maybe anti-Oedipus, which is the limit for all ideas. Philosophy, or at least the Enlightenment, promised to me that would embrace life, but by engaging in language that already abandoned the ideal. However, language is at the same time the pragmatic way to achieve that ideal. I don't know how to wrap this up, so in a nutshell, the will to truth appears on the surface to be a Sisyphean task, but it feels like the exact opposite, which is pretty tragic.
The only way to truly fail in a creative sense is to not. Making something should be the end goal. To make something despite knowing it will be bad, because realistically it will be, and that's okay. But anyways.
Everyone wants to be an artist, but it's a tragic experience under capitalism. You aren't embracing life by being a so-called artist. You are just trying to run away from alienation. Just get a blue-collar job, okay? Stop having ambitions because it will never be fulfilled. Don't listen to a neoliberal cliche of pursuing your dreams or just trying to sell you something, an ideology, a product, a disconnect from the violent world you engage in every day. A minimum wage job is 10 times less dehumanizing than pursuing art under capitalism. Art is already dead. I am an artist, yes, just without illusions of glorifying art, hiding its true reality of not being all that significant. We don't live under socialism, so the nature of art today is constant death, constant alienation. To embrace the modern essence of art is to completely devalue it. By devaluing it a small bit, like me acknowledging that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, and it isn't inherently human, you avoid devaluing it completely. Never overvalue art. It is purely an add-on to actual efforts at change, purely another support among many. It by itself is nothing under capitalism. And even though I dislike art, I will still write my magnum opus essay on dialectic of enlightenment, and that's just the contradictory state in which I view art. I hate it, I think it's worthless, therefore I will pursue it because of that fact. And it is because it brings no inherent meaning that it is not inherently human, nor is it a joyful experience that I will make art. Because art must not be simply explained in grandiose, optimistic terms. Art is like anything else. And under capitalism, it leans more towards alienation no matter how good the artwork may be. Art must die. We must recognize it as dead to fully and truly appreciate it. Appreciate it as a complex and tragic experience. Do not reduce it down to pursuing what's human, because in the age of capitalism, humans no longer, nay, have never existed. That's also the title of my magnum opus. To understand this video as a critique of all of art, or that I'm saying that art is completely useless, or that modern art is garbage and meaningless, or that political art is not enough to bring about change, and so on, is to misread this video. I hate art, but only out of necessity. This video is rather a more in-depth reflection on art, which is what a lot of philosophy is. I do indeed love art, just in my own way, accepting art on my own terms. I do not mean to tell you what to think about art. This is, as is all philosophy, merely another perspective. But even with all these clarifications, I certainly will be misread if anyone sees this. With a bold title like Art Must Die, it's hard not to. It is not art that must die then, but my art. I must view my art as worthless. That's the only way to continue making it.